I wanted to take this time today to share with you some insights about the value of work and how it will relate to our own situations as we become designers, ecopreneurs, and ambitious, positively minded individuals. I apologise for the noise. I live in a college dorm, as you can see, but I'm sure you won't mind. Anyway, let's get into it. So, ultimately, we should, as conscious beings, work for wisdom. Now, wisdom in and of itself, it is attainable to us. What level of wisdom we don't know, but we can always begin, we can always progress in achieving that which we are most passionate about and which we are most capable of doing. However, working for wisdom purely is a waste of time. Now, what do I mean? Okay, so in this video I will be touching on some of the words of Solomon, possibly one of the wisest men who ever lived. And he says this. So when speaking about work, he was asked. He replied with this: the hand of the diligent will rule, while the slothful will be put to forced labour. That's Proverbs 12:24. Now, what does this mean for us? That we should labour. We should labour. Ultimately, we should give everything to our work. And we shouldn't pursue it for our own material goals and needs. Ultimately, we should do it to serve others. Because ultimately, if we are only serving ourselves, we get no fulfillment from it. Think of the times when you slept in, you went to bed perhaps at 2 o'clock in the morning the night before, and you woke up late, perhaps 1 o'clock in the afternoon. You went down, grabbed a waffle or bag of crisps from the cupboard. You went down and watched TV for 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours straight. And then when your parents or your significant other comes home, they ask you, what did you do today? And suddenly you think, damn, I've wasted a day. Do we really feel good about this when we do it? No. So therefore, we need to find a vocation that is serving others, but also ourselves. So, however, we need to keep this in mind. Working just for the sake of work is futile. If we are working just to occupy our time for no greater meaning or no greater purpose, we find no fulfillment in it either. So, another quote I'll touch on is from the concept of that work alone does not bring satisfaction. Here it says, vanity of all vanities, all is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? That's Ecclesiastes 1 verses 2 to 3. Another one is, "So I hated all my toil, in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me." Ecclesiastes 2:18. So we need to keep in mind this. We are accountable for our work, not just to the people we serve, but ultimately to the God that created us. And so doing this, we need to pursue perfection. And though perfection as a goal is unattainable, we should always strive for it. So now when I say perfection, it is such a abstract, subjective concept. Perfection can mean different things for other people. However, what do you feel internally is justified? Do you feel you have done the best work you can? Now, if you do this in work that you are truly passionate about and that you love doing, ultimately perfection comes naturally. We see in the greats of all time, a person who comes to mind is Albert Einstein. Mainly because if not many of you know the story, Albert was, when he was at school and younger, he was written off by his teachers. They said, "Oh, he doesn't know how to do this, he's done. He knows not how to do anything, he stares out the window, whilst everyone else is doing their work, paying attention in class." They wrote him off as a dunce, which is, colloquially in our modern vernacular, mentally, I don't want to use the word retarded. He was written off as a special case. So his mother, hearing of this, took him out of school. Now this is a very profound story for me because it relates to my situation as well. And I'll tell you why in a second. His mother took him out of school when his teachers had already thought, "No, we can't teach this kid. He is not going to amount to anything. He can't concentrate." They'd written him off, and ultimately, we can't blame them for that. We can't blame anything for anything, because it is in their own subjective nature and objective nature, to do so. So his mother took him out of school when his teachers had said, "No, we can't do this anymore," and she homeschooled him. I remember the headmaster of the school in question wrote a letter to his mother saying, "He will never amount to anything. He is, by all objective means, incapable of learning." Now, after his mother died, some 20, 30 years later, I don't know the exact date, he found that letter. By then he was an accomplished physicist. He had fame, he had wealth, he had prowess. And he found that letter. But originally his mother told him, "You're too smart for the education system. They don't understand you. your talents are wasted on them. And it is the realization that with a mother's love, his mother's love, he became what he was. This really hit home for me because I experienced a similar thing when I was at school. I remember when I was diagnosed with autism at age 9, my life sort of fell apart for 2, 3, 4. Now that I think about it, 5 years. I felt ostracised by so many people. They wrote me off. I was a special case. People taunted me, saying, "You're special, you're a retard." They called me a C8 kid, which in my school, that was the room where all the kids with special needs went. And that influenced me to this point where today I find that work is rewarding because you do it for the sake of doing it and you don't care what other people think of you. I do this because I want to help you and help others, not because somebody told me to do it, because we must do what is intrinsic in our nature to find fulfillment. Ultimately, greatness is found from within, and love prevails when we lose all conceptions about what people do and why they do it. I don't blame those people that taunted me, and I'm sure Albert didn't either, knowing that he was a man of accomplished means and socially intelligent. He let go. And this is what we must strive for. We should love everybody, despite what they have done to us. Yeah, that's just a little side story for me. However, we shouldn't just strive for perfection in work alone. We should strive for it in everything. In our relationships, with friends, with family, with our significant others, our children, and with people in general. God calls us to love our enemies. That is what the Lord Jesus taught. The most holy and wise man who ever lived. So it is that we do not blame others for the insecurities that we feel and for that which they have wronged against us, for ultimately they know no better. We know no better either. We are no better than them. But with the air of love and with gratitude, we find inner peace, and that is ultimately better for us. Anyway. Here we touch on work as a gift from God. I will say here that if we work just for the sake of work, it is meaningless, as I said before. However, ultimately we are blessed if we work hard, blessed by others and blessed by God himself, for laziness never got anyone anywhere. I'm sure you know. Ultimately, we are put here for a purpose, and we know this purpose, as I said before, because we feel ease in doing it. It comes naturally. We enjoy it. We find fulfillment after we've done it. We achieve something. So ultimately, we should pursue it 100%, not caring what our peers think of us, especially if you're a man. Do not care what your father thinks of you. A quote from one of my favourite books, The Way of the Superior Man by David Dada. He says, "Live as if your father were dead." Now this sounds pessimistic and negative. However, if your father were dead, would you live differently than you are now? Would you live differently now you are free of his judgment? Would you pursue that which you want to do and love to do without feeling the need to please your father? If you said yes, then maybe it's time to make a change to pursuing what you want to do, because ultimately it is your life, and though we do not live life for ourselves, as this is the surefire way to disaster, we should do what comes naturally and what comes intrinsically to us, so we may serve others, and secondly ourselves, but most of all God. When engaging in work, we shouldn't just pursue it whilst neglecting everything else. This is basic, but ultimately some people have the compulsion to do so. Ultimately, I always had balance in my life. No, actually, no. I do remember a period when I think it was when I was 16, yeah. I was at college, and this was when I was 16 to 18, so for all of those of you who are not in the UK, college is the period between high school and university. So 16 to 18, my main focus was the gym, for example, and I ruthlessly pursued it. I did not care for friendships, relationships. The two things I did ultimately was college, gym, college, gym, college, gym, repeatedly. And I found that after a period of doing that, I felt miserable. I was caring what other people thought of me, even though externally I did not show it. I maintained the aura of a masculine, stoic, macho guy, and I was unapproachable. People wrote me off as someone who was in his own head, and who can blame them? I did not give such an impression to them. I wasn't particularly friendly, my parents. However, a word to all you young guys and girls out there: don't neglect friendships and relationships, because ultimately relationships are the most important thing in this life. We should have relationship with God, but with our parents, with our friends, family, for these are the most important things. What is to live if not for others? Anyway, keep this in mind. Next thing. Sorry, I'll just share a quote with you from what I've written down. Do not toil to acquire wealth. Be discerning enough to desist. That's Proverbs 23:4. Yeah. Do not just work for wealth, because ultimately wealth doesn't bring fulfillment. We want money at this moment because we have none of it. We're broke. However, just working for money is a futile end. Look at all those businessmen who just work for money. They just work for their own needs, their own insecurities to make more. And on their deathbed they realise, I shouldn't have worked so much. There are interviews on YouTube I'm sure you can find, but I think the biggest regret, I watched a video from Chris Williamson, the podcaster, brilliant guy, you should watch him. But he said the biggest regret of so many old billionaires is that I should have spent more time with my children. They said this when they're on their deathbed, by the way. So ultimately we should prioritise relationships over everything else. To conclude this, we need to work with servitude all the time, because ultimately we know that work without servitude is empty. Here's an example. Remember back when you were at school, you had to do so many assignments which you thought were pointless, and you didn't do them 100% because you were like, what's the point? And I can relate, honestly. So you did the assignment and you submitted it, the teacher looked at it, but you never felt any fulfillment from doing it. Because you didn't think it was necessary. You didn't have the motivation to do it, because what was the point if you weren't going to please others? Maybe your parents were proud of you, yeah, but did it benefit them in any way? Did the teacher who marked your paper, did it benefit him? Whether you got a good grade or not affected you, just you. I always got, for example, the lower end, I got D's and C's because I wasn't motivated to work for myself. Perhaps this is your situation as well. Therefore, the key to good work is to work for others. And working for others, that is where we find the most peace and the most happiness and the most enjoyment. So therefore we should have the mind that the greatest satisfaction is living for others and not for ourselves. Ultimately, this life is a test, and if you are religious, you can relate. In so many holy books, I relate to the Bible in this instance, but it repeatedly says in the holy book that this life is a test. It is, to quote St. Paul, a wrestling school. Life is a wrestling school. And in this capacity, we must do what is difficult but right in this life to find fulfillment in the next, to reach that most unattainable goal of sitting by the Almighty when we come to decease from this world. And though it is impossible, theoretically, through belief we can get there. And belief in ourselves that we can do the best that we can do through the vocation that we choose is ultimately what guides us to heaven. To be good people, to have the motivation, the discipline even, not the motivation, to do everything justly and with 100%. I'll end on this point with saying that pursuing our own pleasure too much, we fall into despair. Despair is one of the worst feelings. So avoid it at all costs. This is the advice I give to you. Ultimately, give everything you've got so that you know you yourself personally are a force for good. Thank you for watching. I love you, and I'm so grateful you took the time to watch this and be here with me. For all of those who don't know me, my name's Joel. I'm the founder of the Gaia Vista project, and here we discuss many things relating to the environment, business, ethical business specifically, and enacting change in the world so that we may benefit our children, grandchildren, and generations to come. If this sounds good for you, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notifications button. Again, I'm so thankful that you were here with me, and I will see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.